Hello, everyone. This is Andrew Hunt from the Bovine. I'm excited to have you join us today, and I think we've got a great presentation to share with you guys today. Zoetis has introduced a very exciting new product called CLARIFIDE Plus, and we're pleased to have the opportunity to share with you some more information about it. I have the honor of passing this presentation over to Cheryl Marty from Zoetis, who will be kicking off today's presentation. And Cheryl's got a lot of exciting things to share with us.
Well, thank you, Andrew. Thank you for the opportunity to talk with everybody about an exciting and unique new genomic offering that we have in the U.S. called CLARIFIDE Plus, as Andrew mentioned. My name is Cheryl Marty, and I'm with Zoetis as a U.S. dairy franchise lead and the marketing manager for the dairy genetics and reproduction portfolios. CLARIFIDE Plus is really, it's available for Holstein producers that are going to be seeking to continue to help improve the health, productivity, and profitability of the dairy cattle that they care for. And CLARIFIDE Plus is a culmination of many individuals that have been really dreaming and working towards something better for dairy producers, something better to help improve dairy wellness and dairy herd profitability, something to help reduce the drain on the human resources from treating unhealthy animals, and also something that allows more of the right kind of cows to live out longer and more productive lives. So today's talk will discuss this exciting new tool. Okay, there we go. Okay. So today we're going to have, as an overview, just share with you, first of all, the need for healthier cows. And then we're going to have Dr. Sue DeNice talk about how we actually created these new wellness traits for CLARIFIDE Plus, followed by how are we going to define and support the wellness traits, which Dr. Dan Weigel is going to be sharing with us. We'll have a brief then question and answer period kind of as a halfway point. And then we're going to continue on and apply this new information. So talking then about how do we achieve greater genetic progress with wellness traits, and also using the Dairy Wellness Profit Index that we'll share, and also how do we improve profitability with the Dairy Wellness Profit Index. So I'm going to start out first by sharing why there's a need for something better when it comes to managing health outcomes on a dairy, particularly from a genetic perspective. And to do that, I'm going to share the story of two promising heifers that I owned at one time, Boots and Elise, and they were born well before genomic technology was available. So before CLARIFIDE and genomic testing was available, we were like a lot of other dairy operations. We raised every heifer, and we were encouraged by the way a heifer might look as to what her promise and her potential legacy might be in our herd's future. And for 99.9% of our animals, we had, at best, a 50% chance of getting a live heifer calf out of our favorite animal, because we didn't have sex semen then, and embryo transfer was out of the question unless we had a known AI bull contract. So what happened to Boots and Elise once they calved in? Well, Boots became a very profitable cow in our herd, and she lived up to more than what I expected and hoped she might be. Unlike her sisters and most of her herd mates, she lived to be over 12 years old and produced over 200,000 pounds of milk in her lifetime, which is still excellent by today's measures. But what I didn't appreciate back then was her ability to breed back in a timely fashion year after year, and she really had a health challenge after calving, and if she did, it didn't last very long. So between her production revenue and 10 offspring, she helped fund most of my over 6 years of college education. So Boots was really an extremely profitable cow for me, and I wish I knew a lot more about her genetic potential early on so that I could have invested more in her. Unfortunately, the story didn't end as well with my most promising heifer, Elise. Elise started out great as a first lactation cow, being better in the bulk tank than most, but she still hadn't paid for the cost of raising her. And then she calved in a second time and started off with a rampage, milking extremely well. But unfortunately, that didn't last very long when she ran into some health problems thereafter and had to be euthanized, despite the many efforts that my father and our veterinarian made to try to make her well again. Her fate was a difficult one to take, and one every dairy producer has experienced all too often. While I couldn't have done anything about her own genetics, I wish I had known early on that she could be at risk for disease. And if I had a better way to get the most out of her as a heifer, by making a better mating decision, correcting her faults, and using sex semen to get a superior heifer calf from her, she may have generated more profit for me. But none of that technology, information, or genomic knowledge was available back then. So turning back to today, Elise wasn't alone in her destiny, as there are a lot of other cows that never pay for the cost of raising them. And as we consider the cost of raising heifers, there's a lot of information such as what's shown here on this graph from research that Dr. Galligan and Ferguson completed that will point to the fact that most animals will not pay for the cost of raising them until sometime in their second lactation, as indicated by the blue line. So it's the heifers that make it into the herd into the third or later lactation that especially end up paying for those heifers that don't. At the same time, profitability is driven by cows that are healthy and genetically capable of living long enough to produce milk more in the prime of their careers. And if you look at a typical herd like this graph will show, you'll find that the highest production per cow per day typically comes from cows in their third through fifth lactation. And to reach this longevity, cows must stay healthy and be reproductively sound in addition to producing milk. So what is the trend on cow health? Well, despite better management and many learnings over the years, dairy farms continue to be challenged as ever in managing the health and reproduction of their cows. While you may suggest that some herds are doing more to track disease events in this graph now than in the past, I certainly say that we are not seeing improvement in this trend for most disorders. So the impact of dairy cow illnesses on dairies is also very real and significant. There's an abundance of research illustrating the incidence rates, the high cost of treatment, and the increased risk of culling from dairy cow diseases. And that cost can be from the mid-hundreds to nearly $500 per case. This leads to billions of dollars of loss in the industry each year for dairy producers. And at the same time, these diseases increase the risk for the impacted cows to be culled from the herd. So really, improving health or wellness traits by including genetic selection as part of the overall management practice represents a very compelling opportunity for dairy producers to help manage disease and improve profitability when coupled with sound husbandry practices. So in fact, research was published as far back as 2004 that looked at what is the impact of genetics on health traits, focusing mostly on sire values. And they found that health traits were heritable. However, until now, this type of information has not been commercially available in the U.S., particularly for commercial dairy producers to use as a selection tool in the female population. So there is a need and a desire for something better. So to reduce the health disorders to improve health and wellness of cows, increase saleable milk, reduce the drain on labor, and improve profitability, we have introduced CLARIFIDE Plus. The CLARIFIDE Plus is now a profitable and possible choice for U.S. Holstein producers. CLARIFIDE Plus is also the first commercially available dairy genetic test that's specifically designed for wellness traits in U.S. dairy cattle. With this, CLARIFIDE Plus is a new innovative genomic test that can help make this happen when used as part of the genetic herd management program. So let's take a look at what the current offering is. Up until now, most of today's official genomic tests include the standard genetic information for production, health, somatic cell, reproduction, and calving and type traits. The source of all official genomic test types in the U.S. is from the Council on Dairy Cattle Breeding, and it still is an important collaborative organization to tie information from organizations such as DHI. Within this, the breed associations, like Holstein Association USA, provide the type information that feeds the official U.S. genetic evaluation, again, the world's gold standard. The CLARIFIDE portfolio uses only CDCB official information for existing industry traits, which may be different from other competitive offerings. With all this information, there's been also indexes that have created from this to make animal ranking and bull sorting easier. Some such indexes are net merit, cheese merit dollars, and TPI. The CLARIFIDE Plus builds on these same gold standards of CDCB and adds to it by including the 6 new wellness traits. Those are mastitis, lameness, metritis, retained placenta, displaced abomasum, and ketosis. These wellness traits provide reliable assessments of genetic risk factors for economically relevant diseases. In addition, as part of CLARIFIDE Plus, the Zoetis proprietary test for the pole gene is being offered as a convenient way for producers who are selecting and breeding pole cattle as part of a strategy to proactively manage the potential animal welfare concerns of dehorning. Another feature of CLARIFIDE Plus for Holsteins is it provides 2 new indexes for use in animal ranking. The Wellness Trait Index, and the most preeminent is the Dairy Wellness Profit Index. The Dairy Wellness Profit Index is an index that will provide the most comprehensive and effective way to prioritize economically important traits that affect an animal's lifetime profitability. And these indexes and the new wellness traits are discussed further. Another exciting aspect of CLARIFIDE Plus is that it impacts dairy wellness in multiple ways. At Zoetis, dairy wellness is an important part of our tools because it's important to dairy producers. And so we are working hard to focus on the outcomes that are most important to dairy producers. There are 2 ways that CLARIFIDE Plus impacts dairy wellness. First, by making better, more informed strategic decisions early in life is important when both costs and risks are high, especially in economically challenging times like this year. The healthy calves, robust heifers, and healthy beef outcomes are impacted in this way. Ranking animals with the Dairy Wellness Profit Index can help producers proactively choose which heifers to raise, which ones to sell or put towards the beef market, as well as prioritize breeding investments to generate more heifers out of their very best animals. The second way is the most exciting because CLARIFIDE Plus impacts dairy wellness at the most foundational level of a herd through an animal's DNA. And it does so by offering producers to direct selection for the improvement of performance and now these wellness traits. From production traits to reproduction, health, and new wellness traits, CLARIFIDE Plus now allows us to make more informed decisions to help achieve your genetic selection and profitability goals. So, in summary, CLARIFIDE Plus offers U.S. dairy producers a first opportunity to consider direct predictions for economically relevant diseases within selection strategies. CLARIFIDE Plus is a more comprehensive evaluation of genetic contributions to help provide improved profitability and provides greater opportunity to add value through genomic selection. And finally, CLARIFIDE Plus gets even more to the DNA level of dairy herds today to impact dairy wellness in order to achieve healthy cows, healthy dairies, and healthy food. Next, I will turn it over to Dr. Sue DeNice, who is the head of our R&D at Genetics at Zoetis.
Thank you, Cheryl. I would like to personally welcome all of you to this WebEx. I am a part of the genetics R&D team that was asked to develop and create these genomic predictions for Holstein dairy cows in the U.S. We had hoped that they would provide our customers with valuable information on functional traits. Product development for wellness traits was challenging as we considered the best way to define and deliver this information to customers. The majority of infectious diseases and metabolic disorders impact a cow between late pregnancy and early lactation during one of the most complex and challenging physiological periods for a cow. These transition cow diseases are classically known to have low heritabilities, implying that most of the difference in incidence are due to environmental factors, not genes. Many of these traits are not routinely recorded, unlike yield, somatic cell score, and the fertility traits that can be surmised from existing data or are measured directly. Also, the complexity of biological systems impacted provide the opportunity for systems to go awry as a modern, high-performance cow transitions from a pregnant, non-lactating animal to a non-pregnant, lactating animal. However, even with these challenges, the R&D team knew that genomic predictions for other lowly heritable traits, like daughter pregnancy rate and heifer conception rate, were highly accurate and predicted outcomes well. Thus, even with the complexity of these traits, we were confident that we could develop accurate genomic predictions that would contribute to the dairy wellness outcomes our customers desired if we could acquire the right assets. The right assets consist of phenotypic data, genotypes, and pedigree populations. Development of a genomic prediction for wellness traits required millions of records for the traits of interest: mastitis, lameness, metritis, displaced abomasum, retained placenta, and ketosis, as Cheryl defined earlier. We accomplished this through the help of our field force, who reached out to U.S. commercial dairy producers to ask permission to use their data, and through R&D assets. For customers to add their data to our database, we asked them to authorize on their behalf access to their data through a signed permission form. We use this information then to create this robust evaluation. Genotypes were generated from R&D assets and from customer samples from those who provided their permissions. The pedigree was generated by connecting all of the animals contributing data or genotypes. There are very few organizations with the reach and capabilities to pull all of these assets and millions of records together to create powerful predictions for dairy wellness traits. We were able to consolidate over 10 million lactation records from cows milking in the U.S. When working with health data, there is a lot of variation in the number and quality of health events recorded on commercial dairies. Only data from farms that passed quality standards were included in the wellness trait predictions. For every trait, cows who were incident-free and those impacted by health event from farms recording the data were included in the analysis. A farm meeting the quality standards for reporting in one trait may not contribute to other traits unless they meet the standards for other traits as well. After eliminating suspect health events from the 10 million lactation records, Zoetis was left with about 4 million events for mastitis and lameness, and more than 3 million events for metritis, retained placenta, and displaced abomasum. The pedigree connecting all of these animals contains 15.6 million animals from many generations. And we were able to amass 105,000 animal genotypes in our original analysis. This is a summary of the traits that we've talked about in the evaluation, and you can see the units in which they were all measured. In each case, we have defined that as either a cow who had mastitis in a given lactation or did not. In the third column over, you can see the mean incidence of all the records that we had in the evaluation. So 23% of the cows per lactation had an incidence of mastitis. You can see that the incidence for lameness per lactation was 20%, metritis 10%, retained placenta 5%, displaced abomasum 2%, and ketosis 5%. We also have listed the standard deviations of those traits and the heritabilities. You can see that the heritabilities from our data range from about 6% up to 8%. These are lowly heritable traits, as you might expect. Today, genomic predictions for the core dairy traits in the U.S. undergo a two-step analysis system. They first run a classical genetic evaluation with just phenotypes and pedigrees, and then they calculate direct genetic values for animals that have been genotyped based on a reference population. Finally, they blend the classical with the direct genetic value to estimate a genomic PTA. We considered all options, but we finally decided to go for a one-step analysis procedure that's been recommended by the academic community. This cutting-edge analysis procedure was developed by Dr. Ignacy Mistel's team at the University of Georgia and combines all information in a single analysis to create the genomic predictions. The advantage of this one-step analysis is an improvement in the average reliability as the benefits of genotyped animals flow through the entire pedigree, not just the animals genotyped or their closest relatives. Zoetis has made a substantial investment in computer resources to handle this computationally intensive algorithm. By using the one-step analysis, producers benefit from the latest technology being used across species and a genomic evaluation combining genotypes directly with the phenotypes. This is a table that shows the average reliabilities under two different situations. We have only characterized the reliabilities of young, genotyped, and pedigreed females in our analysis. We had almost 30,000 heifer observations in this analysis. For each one of the 6 traits depicted, you can see the GPTA reliability and the traditional parent average reliability. So the result of combining a large amount of health data, genotyped animals, and a connected pedigree in the latest evaluation analysis technology is genomic predictions for mastitis, lameness, metritis, retained placenta, displaced abomasum, and ketosis. A key milestone was reached when we generated average reliabilities greater than 49% for the genotyped and pedigreed heifers. Now, for those of you that don't think about reliability every day like we do, reliability is a measure of the precision with which we measure the PTA. If precision is low, then the predicted PTA may change as more information is available. We want to optimize the amount of information flowing in and try to guarantee that the predicted reliability, the predictions with specific reliabilities, are going to provide value back to our customers. Another way to think about reliability is through daughter equivalence. In other words, how many daughter records would you have to have in order to see a specific amount of performance in predicted reliability? So our predicted reliabilities, for example, for mastitis, the average GPTA reliability for mastitis was 51. In order to get that sort of reliability using just phenotypic records and the genomic information, we would have to see 57 observations in daughters of a single heifer. For lameness, we had a 50% reliability. It would require 65 records on daughters in order to see this. Moving all the way down, for each one of these traits, the minimum number of daughters required would be 46 in order to see the same reliabilities that we get with the genomic PTA. There are no other predictions for the dairy wellness traits currently available in the U.S., but we've also shown the parent average to demonstrate the additional value of adding genomics. These genomic predictions add over 30 percentage points in reliability over a traditional parent average, if that were even available. These innovations have come together within Zoetis to create the first genomic predictions specifically for dairy wellness traits in the U.S. This table shows you the range in reliabilities for each one of the traits. We have the average reliability as we depicted on the previous slide in these almost 30,000 Holstein heifers, but we also show you the minimum and the maximum that we've seen across the data. At the bottom is a graph that shows the distribution of these reliabilities. So you can see that we've added substantially to our understanding and our predictive ability for the wellness traits. In summary, millions of records from lactating dairy cows in U.S. dairies were evaluated utilizing the latest analysis technology to deliver accurate genomic predictions for wellness traits in our product, CLARIFIDE Plus. New wellness traits for Holsteins have similar or higher average reliability, that is 49% or greater, as some of the core Council for Dairy Cattle breeding traits, like heifer conception rate and daughter stillbirth, demonstrating that predictions for heifer calves will reflect their genetic potential.
All right, my name is Dan Weigel, and it's my pleasure to go through these next few sections with you about our new wellness traits. As Sue and Cheryl said, this is a brand new undertaking for us, new traits, so we had to define how to express them. And we decided to express these traits as standardized transmitting ability. Now, many of you are familiar with standardized transmitting abilities in the States because most of the type from the breed associations are expressed that way. It's a really convenient way to compare to very different traits like, say, stature and foot angle. In this example, we've chosen to express our traits with an average of 100, represented by the mu, with a standard deviation of 5. Using the properties of the normal curve, we know that about 68.2% of the animals in the population will be within one standard deviation above and below the mean. So in this case, heifers, 68% of the heifers will be between 95 and 105. And going out further, for 2 standard deviations, we see that 95% of the population will fall between 90 and 110. So as we go through the predictions with a standardized transmitting ability, it should look fairly normal when you're done, and that's exactly what we end up with. And this plot of the cows in our system, we see that there are some cows that have repeated mastitis, for example, across a couple lactations, and that will pull their evaluation down a little bit more, so we get a little bit of a skewing on the lower end. And here are the rest of the traits: metritis, retained placenta, displaced abomasum, and ketosis. And here's an example of the Excel report that we would generate. And on the left-hand side, we see the breed, of course, only for Holsteins, the product, our dairy wellness profit dollars, which I'll cover in a little bit, net merit dollars. And on the right is another snapshot of some other columns, and that's the individual predictions for each of the traits, along with the wellness dollars in the far right-hand side. Again, in summary, this is only for Holsteins. We'll report these as standardized transmitting ability. The key here is that higher values will indicate a lower risk for disease. They will be centered at 100 with a standard deviation of 5. And the takeaway is there is genetic variation in an animal's ability to resist disease in our operations. So at this point, I guess we'll take some questions from open up the line. Any questions?
Yep, we've had a few questions. Just give me a second. I'm just adding a few. Do we have to use the high density test to get the values for these wellness traits?
No, we do not. There's both options available, so they can use the low density or the high density version.
The only thing I'd qualify on that is low density doesn't really mean what it used to. It's 19,000 K chip, and for some of us that's pretty high density. So the options are 19 versus 60K.
Okay. And another question that's come in is, because this is user data and not supervised data, does that affect the reliability of the traits?
Well, we've tried to define and filter the data to make sure that we have the most accurate data possible. While many people would suggest that if we had supervised data flowing in, that would be the best option altogether. However, because these traits are lowly heritable, we've got to amass a large amount of information. And through amassing that large amount of information, we hope to reduce the noise associated with the data collection process. So while that might be the best world that we would exist in, at the moment we're very confident in the predictive ability of our STAs.
The other comment I would make upon that is today in the States anyway, our calving ability and stillbirth data are not really supervised data. They're producer collected data, and you know, there's again, I'm a big selection index guy, but you know, I can certainly understand how producers would not want to use a bull that's above a certain percent for calving yeast, because that is a very, very important trait, and we've made a lot of progress and done a lot of good with that producer collected data.
Okay. Are these reliabilities high enough to make culling decisions?
Yeah, you know, we again, Sue pointed out the heifer conception rate and daughter stillbirth. Again, when I get my heifers back with the core predictions with our base CLARIFIDE product today, my reliabilities on my full pedigreed heifers are about 52% for heifer conception rate, and they'll be about 47% for daughter stillbirth. And we've analyzed a lot of data and a lot of different herds on those two traits, and they perform very, very well. Again, the key is that there's genetic differences, and when those heifers spread out like that, they really do have differences in performance. So that was why we set out with the 40% minimum reliability as a goal, because we had a lot of confidence with those two traits in particular that if we got there, that would really translate into phenotypic or real-life differences for our producers.
And in reality, when you're talking about culling decisions too, what you're going to hear next from Dan is using a selection index, because you really don't want to pick and cull based on one or two traits. You really should be using a selection index to make those decisions. And then that reliability is going to be in the upper 60s for that particular trait that we're going to talk to you about.
Okay. Are the heritabilities for these traits high enough to actually see genetic gains?
You know, that's an interesting question. If you look at some of the traits that we select on today, for example, daughter pregnancy rate, that heritability is 0.04. If you look at daughter stillbirth, so Dan, is that like, or daughter or heifer conception rate is 0.01. So we've seen that we can make progress in those traits with even lower heritabilities. So I think that the answer to that is yes, we believe that we've got a great opportunity for being able to predict the animals that are going to be the healthiest in our herds.
Yeah, and for more information on that one, we had a webinar that we did with you guys on low heritability traits, and I'd recommend people to go to that recording, and I'll put a link in the chat box to go and actually see just how that can be effective. So we'll be in there. One of the other questions that's come in is, are there more or other traits coming?
Well, certainly we believe that there's a lot of opportunity to help our U.S. producers be more productive and more efficient in what they do. So Zoetis is a very productive group. We are going to try to do our best to make sure that our producers have the best technology to help them succeed.
Okay. The next question, actually, we're going to, just the correlation question, viewer 28, we're going to actually hold that one because I think you're going to see an answer for that one coming up. But viewer 47 asks, would you recommend making mating decisions based on wellness traits?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's, I'm a big believer in corrective mating. Again, it fits right with my philosophy of using an index. You pick animals that are best for your index based on the economic values of those traits. And if an animal's short on a particular trait, well, that's fine. Let's go find a sire that will fix that value. So again, the only one I really am okay with is when producers say I'm just not going to use this bull because he's too high on calving yeast. I'm not going to argue with that, but for the most part, the rest of them, let's find let's pick on the index and fix with corrective mating.
Okay, and viewer 13 asks, if all these early lactation events impact longevity in repro, does selecting for days open via DPR accomplish similar things?
I think we'll cover that going forward a little bit, but certainly all these health traits are related, and the more we're just getting started on, the more we'll understand how they all fit together going forward.
And then I think I can handle this question next. It says, viewer 41 asks, are all the bull studs interested in including DPW in bull evals? Some have already their own indexes, for example, wondering if you standardize across industry. And I can speak at least from our half, side on the bovine side, that we've had pretty much all but one or two of the major AI units send us press releases saying that they would be evaluating for these traits. And I also know a couple of the other organizations are just in the final evaluation side to see how it fits within their genetic program structure. So some of them are even on today's webinar doing that very evaluation.
So I think it's fair to say that, yeah, we've had a chance to talk with all the different AI or most of the AI companies, and we didn't give them a lot of time on this. So there may be some that are still in the evaluation mode, and that's okay. It's an important decision for them to make, and we appreciate those that have already come out and shared their stance on the Dairy Wellness Profit Index.
Cool. And I've got a couple more questions, but I think are better suited for after the next group of presentations. They tie a lot more closely into that. So I'm going to hold them and turn it back over to you guys for continuing.
All right. So, so the next section we want to talk about is achieving more genetic progress with the wellness traits and our indexes that we've prepared. So, again, we're very, very excited about these this new offering. We're humbled with the response that the industry has given us. But again, we don't want people to get too, we think they're important, but we don't want people to get too carried away with it. But we do feel it's important to have these traits because direct selection is better than indirect selection. That's the first topic I'll cover. And then the second one is, where do you couch these traits? How do you fit them into your program to make the most profit? All right. So this is a trait that this is a graph that I've run for a lot of different producers while we were working on these traits. And what I did is this is a herd that had 557 heifers, first lactation heifers that had genomic results. And when I sorted those heifers on their GPTA for productive life, and so you can see that the heifers on the far left-hand side, the top PL group, that contains the 112 heifers that were highest for GPTA productive life, and the average GPTA in that group of heifers was 5.7 months, as shown on the red line. On the far right-hand side, you can see that this was a really good herd because even their bottom 112 heifers for productive life averaged a minus 0.4. So they're right at breed average, and they're the bottom 20%. So then what I did is I queried the herd management software, and I asked what percent of the heifers in the far left group were lame or had mastitis or metritis or ketosis or retained placenta, or my favorite is an owner of dairy cattle sold and died. And when I did that, I found that 68% of those heifers had one of those events. And you can see as I go across the different groups, we get all the way over to the far right, the lowest productive life group had 91% of those heifers had one of those events. So that's pretty wild. And this result has been very, very consistent as we go from herd to herd as I've done this analysis. And I don't think it should surprise anybody on this on this call, that in today's herds, heifers that are predicted to stick around a long time are probably not going to have issues because in today's world, producers don't have time for heifers that cause trouble, and so therefore they have a lower productive life. So we might ask ourselves, do we really need the new traits? If productive life is catching all this information, do we really need the new traits? And that'd be a fair question. Here's a graph from Enlight of my heifers over time. The light blue line is my heifers, and the top line is the breed average for somatic cell over time. Now, this only shows the last 10 years, and we've made progress for somatic cell in the last 10 years. That trait came out in 1994, and we really didn't make a lot of progress. In fact, it would continue to go backwards because we were pretty focused on protein yield. And but yeah, now we're making good progress for somatic cells. So surely our mastitis rates are going down. But yet when we look at the data from the NOM survey, it shows that even though we've had productive life in somatic cell since '94, and you can certainly argue that we haven't selected enough for those traits, and the plots on the CDCB website would, show that we obviously didn't select enough for those traits. But and you can also argue we probably do a better job of recording these diseases. But it's clear our estimated incidence continues to go up, and we can do a better job of this. Just to demonstrate the difference between direct selection and indirect selection, these are the last 30 heifers that I got genomic results for when I put this slide together. I just put them all together. On the bottom axis, I've got their GPTA for milk pounds. And on the vertical axis, I've got GPTA protein pounds. So I'm very interested in making progress for protein yield. But imagine I couldn't measure protein yield. Because the correlation in the breed is 0.83, and the observed correlation in this group of heifers is 0.81, that's a very, very strong correlation. If I couldn't measure protein yield for some reason, and I could only select for milk yield, I'd do a pretty good job. If I selected the top 3 heifers, I think I'd get 2 out of 3 right for finding the highest heifers for protein. Again, those are 2 highly correlated traits. When I take that same group of heifers, instead of having protein on the vertical axis, now I've got GPTA for fat. Now, all of you producers on the call know, fat's been a pretty profitable deal the last couple of years. So I'm pretty interested in making progress for fat yield. Well, the correlation in the breed is only 0.43 between milk and fat pounds. And just so happens in this group of 30 heifers that I tested here, the correlation is lower than that. And you'll have that with small sample sizes. The correlation is only 0.2 in this group of heifers. So again, if I want to pick the top 3 heifers for fat yield, and I use milk, wasn't able to select directly for fat, well, I would do a very good job. In fact, one of the very, very best heifers I have for fat yield is not very good at all for milk yield. And that's what happens when you don't have a strong correlation. You'll make a lot of mistakes. Just to show how that translates to our new traits. In the top line here, we've got productive life. The question is about relationships among these health traits. And we know there's a strong correlation. And the correlation between productive life and daughter pregnancy rate is 0.64. That's very, very strong. In the States, we didn't have DPR evaluations until 2002. And we really didn't make much progress until about year 2000 or 2001 for that trait. Once we got the trait and genomic predictions, then we could really make progress for that trait. Likewise, we launched the evaluations for somatic cell score in '94. At that time, we estimated the genetic correlation between it and clinical mastitis was minus 0.7. We've been selecting heavily for somatic cell score for the last few years, and so I think we've changed that, altered that correlation between those 2 traits. And now we currently estimate that correlation is minus 0.45. This is very similar to the estimate from the recent CDN trait for mastitis resistance. If you look at that technical publication, you'll see that the genetic correlation between clinical mastitis and somatic cell score is minus 0.44 for 2-year-olds, I believe minus 0.58 for second and later lactation. Again, when I do that graph of looking at the incidence of disease versus productive life, I see more lameness in the poor productive life cows. But again, that trait is a catch-all. It's related to all these events, but not strongly related to any particular one of them. And again, the foot and leg composite, just no correlation between lameness. Again, in our data, lameness is probably more due to metabolic issues or digital dermatitis, and cannot really be described by the structure of the foot and leg. And finally, same thing as with lameness. We definitely see more metritis in our low productive life heifers versus our high productive life heifers, but not a real strong correlation. Again, this is just to visualize it. It's in this case, we've got 76,000 cows in our database that have contributed data to both somatic cell score and mastitis predictions. Again, so this is there's a part-whole relationship here. The reason the cow ends up being very low for either of these traits is her data helped her get her there. Okay, so it's not a real proof, but certainly something just to look at so we can get an idea of what we expect going forward. So what we did is we sorted those 76,000 cows on their GPTA for somatic cell score, as represented by the blue bar. So when we look at the Q1 group, the far left-hand side, we see that the lowest 20% of those cows, those 76,000 cows, for GPTA somatic cell score, had about 16% of them had mastitis in their first lactation. We go to the far right, to the Q5 group, we can see that somatic cell score works. It absolutely works. We see about half the mastitis, or 8% mastitis, in that best 20% group. That trait absolutely has done us a lot of good in helping to reduce mastitis if we used it. Now, we take those same 76,000 cows and we resort them on GPTA for mastitis. We then see the lowest 20%, the Q1 group, we can see that they had about 22% of them had mastitis in their first lactation. We go all the way over to the Q5 group. You can see why we're excited. Only 4% of those cows had mastitis. That's phenomenal. So this makes us pretty excited going forward how well these traits will work in our herds. So again, we don't want to get too carried away. As excited we are, we still sell spectrum mass and exceed and things like that. We can treat these outcomes, but so let's put them in the right context. Again, we've got to balance. We want a cow that can do it all. We want her to give a lot of milk, get pregnant, and then on the expense side, avoid these disease insults, because we do know it's more than just the labor and medicine costs, that these do really rob our production potential. So they actually do have a lot of value. And again, this is what it's all about. We find these cows out in our herds, and wow, they're just amazing creatures. I did a web search for invisible cow, and this is what came back. And as you read the article on her, she didn't have a case of mastitis until her fourth lactation, pregnant on first service every year for a lot of years in a row. Phenomenal cow, and there's no argument that she made her owners a lot of money going. And so we love to get more of those. The two indexes that we put forth are to aid in the selection. The first one is what we call wellness trait index, or wellness trait dollars. Again, it's just using the 6 wellness traits we've been talking about and the polled trait. Then the second index is the one we really, really want to focus on. That's the Dairy Wellness Profit Index. And that includes all the wellness traits in polled, plus all the other traits that are in part of net merit dollars and all of our other indexes, TPI, et cetera. Again, we base these indexes on the economic weights. There's a lot of literature in the scientific literature about what a case of mastitis costs you, what the case of a DA costs you, and so we reviewed those and came up with what we thought were solid estimates. For the other traits that are part of net merit dollars, we really leaned on the USDA economic assumptions, except that we tried to remove the cost of disease from traits like productive life and somatic cell score. And then the polled value, we took from the literature. Probably not going to make our polled producers happy, but the current estimates cost $7 to horn a calf today, and so that's what we used. All right, so wellness trait dollars. Again, this is the 6 traits. It shouldn't surprise anyone. Mastitis, a very, very costly disease, high incidence on our dairies today. That gets the lion's share of the weight. 41% of our index is mastitis. The second one is lameness at 27%, and then metritis at 19%. Again, DA is a very costly disease, but we don't see a lot of it, so it doesn't get as much weight. And finally, ketosis gets the least amount of weight at 1%. And the bottom line is, once we take those economic weights that we developed and multiply the wellness trait predictions for these heifers by those economic weights and sum it up into wellness trait dollars, we see a big difference between heifers for this ability to resist disease and the value that's worth. So again, we look at the table there. That's transmitting ability. That's what our friends in the AI industry are used to focusing on. What's that bull going to transmit to his daughters? And we look at the 10th percentile in our herd here, and we have a minus $82. And we look at the 90th percentile, we're at 178. Now again, our focus at Zoetis is on the replacement heifer, and our producers are interested in what those heifers are going to do in their herds. So we got to take those differences in the transmitting abilities, and we got to double them. So that $260 value becomes $520. So that's, when we look at the difference between the 10th percentile and the 90th percentile, we estimate that's worth $520 over the course of their lifetime, just because of the wellness traits. Again, there's large differences in these traits once we sum them up, and that means there's opportunities for genetic progress. Again, we know that there's a relationship among these traits and the other traits that we have available to us. So the best way to use this index is part of a more complete selection index, and we've also that we propose Dairy Wellness Profit Index is one of the ways to do that. Again, so what's in Dairy Wellness Profit Index? So that's got all the traits in net merit plus our wellness traits. So production gets 34% of the weight. We took some of the weight, we give them to production, and we moved it over to wellness traits. Our health and calving, and in this case, what we have in health and calving would be productive life, somatic cell score, and calving ability and stillbirths. And those traits get 19% of our weight. We also have the repro traits, DPR, heifer conception rate, cow conception rate, and the type traits, which is udder depth, udder composite, body composite, and foot and leg composite, getting in the index as well. All right, same thing. We take all those different PTAs and STAs, and we multiply them by the economic value. We sum them up to come up with our dairy wellness profit dollars for our heifer, and we see big, big differences, over $1,248 between the 10th and the 90th percentile. We really, instead of focusing on the individual weights, that's very, very hard to do. With this number of traits, and with all of them being interrelated, it's very difficult to look at your index weights and know exactly what's going to happen. So what we really prefer to do is to say, what's going to happen when you select for this index? And when we look at the column under net merit dollars, from all the way from milk all the way down to cow conception rate, or CCR there, those values are right from the CDCB website. And that means, the meaning of those values are, if we select for net merit dollars, again, today if you look on their website, net merit dollars has a negative weight on milk yield. So, but if you select for net merit dollars, if you make one standard deviation progress for net merit dollars, you will actually improve milk yield by 246 pounds. That's because milk yield, even though we put a negative weight on, it's related to all the other traits in this index. So we end up making 246 pounds of progress for every standard deviation of net merit dollars progress. Again, to be fair, if we look, because our new traits are related to the health traits that are in net merit dollars today, by selecting for net merit, you are improving these other traits. Again, we look at mastitis. You're making 0.86 progress for mastitis. You're making progress for lameness. Retained placenta is not as strongly related to some of these traits. We're actually not making progress for it today, but DA and ketosis, we are absolutely making progress today. What we're doing with Dairy Wellness Profit Dollars is we want to put a little more focus on those traits with direct selection. So that will change our index a little bit, but the economics drive us to want to make more progress for those traits. All right? Again, some people might look at we see slightly less production progress with our trait, But again, as I look at the seed corn advertisements, the real focus isn't on the yield. It's about protecting that yield. Can we avoid issues? You know, if we don't get a timely rain, will this hybrid be able to power through that and give us a decent crop? Anyway, so again, as our industry matures in its selection for genetic ability, it seems pretty clear this is the direction that we're going to go. Again, to make the average Holstein cow in the United States today has got tremendous production capability. If we can just keep her from having these issues, she can make us a lot of money. So again, the take home today, you know, we've made a lot of progress with CLARIFIDE in the last few years for our customers. We think CLARIFIDE Plus is a big step forward because direct selection is just more effective where we want to do. We put out dairy wellness profit dollars. We think it's the bottom line. You know, it's comprehensive. It really helps weight all these traits appropriately given the interrelationships among them, and it really describes a lot more genetic variation profitability than other indexes. All right, I'll turn it back over to Cheryl.
Great, thank you, Dan. So in this part of the presentation, I'm going to try to answer one of the most common questions that we get, and that's about the economics of CLARIFIDE, and then specifically CLARIFIDE Plus as to whether or not it has extra value to producers to switch to. When we look at the value of genetics, we need to consider that genetics are a long-term investment. And many dairies we talk to have other options, such as just like larger corporations, such as expansion, putting up a new facility, or even just using parent average to make the same decisions in their dairy. So the best option to evaluate the value of genetics is actually going to be net present value. The model we use uses net present value to estimate the economic return of testing with CLARIFIDE or with CLARIFIDE Plus, and then making genetic decisions such as which ones do I keep or cull, or which animals do I want to amplify the genetics from outstanding females through the use of either sex semen or embryo transfer. And net present value is a preferred method for corporate finance to evaluate our alternative investments whose value streams occur over many, many years, just like genetics continues out over many years. And so in genetics, it's actually truly an additive investment over time as well, meaning the changes that you make today will impact the next generation and half again the next generation, and so forth. So net present value doesn't have a way to measure those differences between those types of investments and competing investment strategies. So the values and the information shared today will be using a calculator that we developed with Dr. Dave Galligan and Jim Ferguson at the University of Pennsylvania that does estimating of the net present value of genomic testing with various strategies that a herd might use with an investment cost versus other strategies and alternatives. So when you look at a net present value model, we'll be just basically comparing investments. And in our example, genomic testing with CLARIFIDE or CLARIFIDE Plus will be investment B. And B, it'll be compared to various other strategies investments, such as doing nothing different, or investing their money in savings account or 401k that earns, let's say, 8% interest over 10 years. In a genetic model, behind the scenes, we use the time-tested genetic progress formula for estimating the genetic change per year. And when you use a profitability value, such as net merit dollars or the Dairy Wellness Profit Index, you can then now use this formula to estimate the value of that investment in genomic testing. We saw earlier in Dan's presentation that Dairy Wellness Profit Index has a very large genetic standard deviation, and it is actually larger than net merit in this case. So what this means is that the Dairy Wellness Profit dollars describes more genetic variation in that total profitability of cattle due to genetics only. So think about what it might mean if you were able to describe close to $400 more variation amongst 95% of your cattle. By including more economically relevant traits with our wellness traits, we can now describe more variation in expected lifetime profit, and also see more re-ranking amongst animals as compared to the net merit dollars, for example. In fact, in the first 3 herds I reviewed after our launch, when I looked at the bottom 10% or the top 10% of the original animals ranked in net merit, I saw 10 to almost 10 in one herd, and 30 to 35% of the animals change when switching to the dairy wellness profit dollars as a ranking tool. That's quite a difference, and it means that by choosing a more comprehensive selection index, like the Dairy Wellness Profit Index, you can achieve faster genetic progress towards profitability. And let's look at some real examples of some profitability differences. In our first example, we'll look at comparing two comparison models. One is looking at investing at the genomic testing using net merit dollars to rank the animals, and what that value is compared to using parent average net merit dollars. That is the value that we're going to see here in blue. Specifically, this value of $129 per kept animal in blue means that in this scenario, when 15% of the lowest animals are culled, either using genomics or parent average, and there is no time value money in this. And you can compare the profitability from genetics only by about $129. Again, this is by comparing using genomics versus parent average information at no investment. This takes into account four value streams. One, from raising only the best 85% of the heifers, and then the higher performance they'll expect from this, and then also three value streams for three offspring that are born because genetics are passed on to the next generation. We also counted for less than 50% of the offspring being heifers born. So in the end, genomic net merit dollars is better than parent average net merit dollars as a ranking tool by $129 per kept female. That's big, and that's why genomic testing was an official set through the CDCD is of high value for dairies. So now let's look at, okay, what is that value for CLARIFIDE Plus? Well, with CLARIFIDE Plus, we have a new animal ranking index of the Dairy Wellness Profit Index, and that value is going to be shown in red. Remembering that genetic variation is larger for the Dairy Wellness Profit Index, it does have a slightly lower reliability of 67 versus 71, but the reliability of that going forward in the same scenario and even increasing that investment cost to genomic tests like $14 more per head, there is still an even greater profitability improvement using the genomic Dairy Wellness Profit Index as compared to using a parent average value. If you remember, nobody has a parent average genetic value, so this is going to be a very low estimate of what in the reality is going on in the dairies. So therefore, again, if you compare this $185 from the Dairy Wellness Profit dollar improvement versus the net merit improvement, you can see there's about a $55 advantage by investing, in this case, $14 more per animal to test than using the net merit dollars through other testing. So we want to consider then that money has a value over time, and it could be making interest in a good return. So instead of 0% that we used in the last comparison, looked at just purely the genetic advantage, let's just say we have an 8% interest over 10 years that we want to compare it to. Now that's way better than the stock market today. But we can model that out. So if there's a positive number from this, that's going to be a good decision. So if we first of all use the exact same scenarios in the previous table, but now we use a higher interest rate of 8%, the two bars to the right are going to be showing here again the Dairy Wellness Profit dollars in red versus parent average of $78, which is again higher than the value in blue using net merit dollars. And that again, this is about a $16 difference in investment. Here again, significantly higher investment in this scenario to use CLARIFIDE Plus and get the Dairy Wellness Profit Index to rank animals, you can achieve about a $20 more advantage in that present value in profitability per kept female. That is a great investment. You might be asking yourself, well, why even do genomic testing? Well, that answer is in the left two bars. So instead of the comparison here being parent average, we now are comparing all of the investments and no change and no selection. You can see you could really get behind if you're not even genomic testing at all. So okay, let's say, what about herds that you're not in a situation where you can call the bottom end out? Well, we can do those scenarios as well. So this scenario follows those same other processes. This time it only has one value stream used, and it compares using genomic rankings versus parent average rankings. So here, when sex semen is strategically used in the top half of the heifers, much more than the bottom half, there is, again, a large improvement in profitability as well as in that present value. The bottom line here, again, is it is very, very difficult to beat the economic value that ranking animals with the Dairy Wellness Profit Index from CLARIFIDE Plus, even at a larger investment, that it will bring to the operations such as these for genetic selections in the future. But it also takes more than just a test to make genetic improvement. You have to execute and make good decisions, and that's where we are also trying to work very, very hard to provide support for CLARIFIDE and CLARIFIDE Plus, and why we're more than just a lab test. So we have people here that are willing and able to help support producers. We've got a lot of people in the field, some specialists. We have over 24 geneticists and researchers in R&D, outcomes research, technical service, bioinformatics, sales and marketing. We also have another 15 additional technical service veterinarians. And we also have Holstein as a partner, so there's another great group to work with. And as AI companies are starting to work with us a little more as well, they may as well be additional partners with us in this effort to really work together to help you as dairy producers implement genomic testing. We also believe it's really important to make good decisions on the dairies, and that also needs some good support tools to help you make better decisions, because every situation is very different. We can show you these models and so forth, but until it's really using your situation, you may not be convinced, and we have calculators to do that. So we've got inventory calculators, we've got, as I described, some net present value models that can show you your situation. And for those that are looking, when is the best time to sell a heifer, we've got some of those calculators as well. Reporting-wise, we also have ways to have continuous availability of genetic information. So initially, we have Excel reports, and Light is available for Holstein producers with our partnership at Holstein USA. And we also have ways to put it into on-farm dairy programs such as Dairy Comp, PC Dart, and some others. And we also try to be very supportive of the industry. We've been there to try to support DHI. We've added, in fact, several herds into DHI testing as a result of this. We work hard to support different functions and events, and we're definitely here and trying to work very hard at educating the U.S. producers, other people in the industry, and those not related in the genetics area. So we've been working very hard in that area. So as a whole, as we think about it in summary, Dan mentioned before, CLARIFIDE Plus, we believe, is a very big step forward in the U.S. Holstein producer industry. It's very exciting for us, and we're very humbled and honored to offer the first commercially available dairy genetic evaluation for these wellness traits. We really are trying to, again, help producers identify animals with the greatest genetic potential to help reach the wellness and profitability goals. We've also, these new wellness traits have very similar or higher reliabilities as existing traits, as Sue talked about, such as heifer conception rate and daughter stillbirth. And then, as Dan mentioned, direct selection with the wellness traits is better. And to put it all together, the Dairy Wellness Profit Index is a very easy to use and comprehensive selection index that is exclusively available through CLARIFIDE Plus. So with that, we do have, if you still have more questions, we'll certainly take them here, but I just want to point you also to our website for clarifideplus.com. We've got several even longer short videos on CLARIFIDE Plus. If you want to get more in specifics, we also have several other tools there. But for now, we'll open it up to questions.
Okay, great, and sharing everything with us, guys. One of the first questions I have, or it kind of stems from our last part, was there's already, it seems like indexes similar to this. How is this one different, or how will they be standardized? I know there's some transition indexes, and I think maybe some people are having troubles understanding how this is different than just an index that way.
Yeah, again, this index has all these traits that we really don't have in the United States. I mean, in other countries, they have predictions like this, but So our index will be pretty unique in that regard. Certainly, we're pretty open that TPI or net merit in the states here, both those will improve these traits somewhat by indirect selection, but this is just a little bit more precise as we go forward.
And I think too, if you think about like the graph that I showed, the variation that, if you think about what do we know about a cow or an animal and their total lifetime profitability, we're still probably not done. I mean, really, there's other pieces that could be missing. So we're just trying to identify more of those pieces of the pie that contribute genetically to the profitability of a cow.
And then maybe a question I have, a follow-on to that one is, I think most of the indexes that are out there currently are all just indexes using theories on traits that we've already had, whereas this is the first one, I think, that there's actually the development of new traits.
Exactly. Yep. The 6 new wellness traits this is the only index, the Dairy Wellness Profit Index, and of course the sub-index of wellness trait is the only source for these new traits to be included.
Yep. Next question that comes in from viewer 23 is, in the U.S., reporting of various diseases is not standardized. How did you account for this?
So we filter the data as it comes in. The commercial dairy producers have allowed us to access their information, and then we go through a number of filtering strategies to try to identify the data that is being recorded routinely and that we think will be very useful in developing the predictions that we've developed. So it goes through a substantial filtering process as we look at the incidence of those traits, we look at how many are in each of the contemporary groups that we've developed, and make sure that the data is contributing in a reasonable way to our predictions.
Okay, great. And then the next question comes in, why any type? Did it have any impact on the value, or are there historical reasons?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. As we looked at the indexes again, as we tested it, whether having it in or not, we didn't really see a big difference as much as you would think. So we decided to be consistent with USDA and include the traits as much. Obviously, the weight is we didn't change the weights, but since we have more traits in the model, they get less net weight. Our customers are we do have body composite in there with a negative weight, and our customers are pretty interested in having keeping smaller cows, or at least maintaining the size the cows are playing big right now.
Okay, and the next question that comes in, how can I make breeding decisions based off of this?
I think the best way is to use an index, and as we presented, there's of course a lot of different indexes to choose from. That's again the best way to do it, and if you're looking for the most comprehensive way to do that, we feel the Dairy Wellness Profit Index would be a great value and index to look at and really seriously consider for any female selection decisions, and if it's available in the bowls, the same there.
Okay, a follow-on question from viewer 23. Are the disease statistics based from treatment reporting or disease reporting?
It would be all animals within a contemporary group that have been filtered, so herd year season data from a specific herd. There would have to be a certain level of incidence reporting, and so that would include both the cows that had these diseases as well as the cows in the same group, contemporary group, who did not.
Okay. If I've tested my animals in the past, do I have to go back and retest them in order to get these wellness traits?
Very good question. So I guess there's 2 parts to that answer. The first part, if they were CLARIFIDE tested with us in the past, that means we have the DNA on file, we've got their genotype, and we can continue to get the CDCB results from Council on Dairy Cattle Breeding. So we have everything except the wellness trait. So we can then upgrade if you, by request, and you can get an easy report from us, just requesting your full list of animals, and you can then go in and choose if it's all of them or some of them. You can do it either way, and then we'll be able to upgrade at a very economical cost. Now, if you have never tested with us and you have animals that you've had a genomic result from another source, we can also handle those. But because we don't have the DNA, we don't have their genotypes, and we don't have the CDCB information, we will need, first of all, a new DNA sample. We'll need to get their full, pedigree information if they have it, and then finally, we can run that. There will be a substantial price difference because we have to go through the whole process from start to finish.
Okay. And I think the last question I saw come in here is, if I'm looking to buy an animal and I know she's been tested, will this information appear on her pedigree with Holstein USA?
At this time, and we have talked with Holstein about it, it's on their radar, but at this time, no, and that will be something that the Holstein Association will need to make a decision on.
Okay. And the last, this question I can even answer. No, it's only currently available for testing in the USA. It's not available for anyone testing outside of the United States, correct?
Correct, yep, and Holstein's only at this time.
And Holstein's only. Purebred Holsteins, or all Holsteins?
Yep, purebred Holsteins. Anything that makes, so there's already edit checks that the Council on Dairy Cattle Breeding does on the breed, and so they have to be roughly 90% pure Holstein based on what they see in the DNA, and so we use those same edits, and if they pass the CDCB results and they're Holstein, they will be able to get the wellness traits with it.
Well, I want to thank everyone for attending today. I also want to thank all the presenters from Zoetis for doing a great job and sharing a lot of information with us in a very short period. But I want to thank everyone for joining us today, and hope you have a great day.